Hey, welcome back, everyone. So you can see I am moved into my new place, got my new setup, well, old new setup back up, and some big news happening tonight, folks. I'm going to talk about Trump launching his new 45office.com website, what this means, what's going on with it. Also going to be talking about what's happening a bit more with talking about the cartels threatening politicians at the border, talking about the new digital currencies being pushed out not just by China, but now by the United States, and something I've been warning about for quite a while. You folks might remember I've been saying for a long time now that the model to bounce back from the virus is being manufactured by the Chinese Communist Party. Part of it is this new digital currency. The United States, the Federal Reserve, they're now talking about doing it. And so what I've been warning about seems to be happening, but there is some hope, a lot going on right now. Be going into it. And folks, good seeing y'all. Jack Delaney, good seeing you. Amanda Kassler, hi from Michigan. Good seeing you. Thank you. TX Packrat, hello from Texas. Thanks. Ron Planton, sorry. Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. Yeah, real great, folks. All right, as always, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them first. We'll go over a few stories. And so first off, the first story of the night. Let's talk about Trump's new website. Now, the Epoch Times here is reporting. It says this. Former President Donald Trump launched a new website on March 29th, dedicated to preserving the legacy of his administration and his post-presidency activism. And it says, quote, "The office of Donald J. Trump is committed to preserving the magnificent legacy of the Trump administration while at the same time advancing the American First agenda." The landing page of 45office.com states, and it continues, quote, "Through civic engagement and public activism." Hear that? Civic engagement, public activism. And it continues, "The office of Donald J. Trump will strive to inform, educate, and inspire Americans from all walks of life as we seek to build a truly great American future. Through this office, President Trump," and they're saying President Trump, it says, "Through this office, President Trump will remain a tireless champion for the hardworking men and women of our great country and for their right to live in safety, dignity, prosperity, and peace." Now, the website's About page celebrates the former president's legacy on key policy issues, including the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, addressing the crisis on the southern border, and securing peace deals in the Middle East. And it says, quote, "Whether it was combating the virus, fighting foreign terrorists, creating jobs, securing America's borders, unleashing America's energy, revitalizing American patriotism, or restoring the American spirit, President Trump never wavered in his defense of our values, our families, our traditions, and our freedom." And it continues as well, stating President Trump, again it says President Trump, "President Trump knows that as long as we remain faithful to our citizens, our country, and our God, then America's best days are yet to come." Now, the 45office.com website was registered on January 12th, meaning Trump's been working on this for a while now. That was a week before Trump left office, right? Left the White House. And aside from a basic black and white logo, the page remained blank until March 29th. Some of Trump's statements have been posted on donaldjtrump.com, a website that used to serve as the main portal for the Trump campaign. So what are we seeing here, folks? Trump is making his public debut once more. Trump is engaging now, and as he calls it, activism, community organizing, so on, fighting for the values that he fought for when he was president. And we're going to see very likely maybe protests, maybe rallies, maybe movements, maybe political activism in terms of getting people out to vote for set candidates, something he's been talking about doing for a while now. All of this now appears to be starting. And it's interesting, too, as I've mentioned previously, Trump's calling this the office, right? He talked about the office of the former president. He's no longer calling it that. He's calling it he's calling it 45office.com, the office of the 45th president, suggesting that he's not saying former president. He's specifically saying President Trump, right? And he's calling it the office of Donald J. Trump, basically pushing for the same agenda he pushed for previously, just he's doing it now from the grassroots and activist level. And really, folks, going forward, we can expect a lot of action under this. We can expect Trump to not only get behind different candidates, but very likely continue doing his rallies, his Trump rallies. We can expect him as well to have more ability to move freely in the private sector, able to start private businesses, able to do a lot of things he couldn't do as president, while enjoying the legal protections that private citizens get as opposed to public figures, well, to some extent. He's still technically a public figure, but we can expect Trump to become a lot more active on the grassroots level, while at the same time having some of the legal protections that normal citizens have, meaning it's actually harder for them to go after him. It's harder for them to lie about him because now he can sue them for libel. If the media lies about him now, they can sue him for libel. And really, we can expect a lot of movement going on. This is in addition to him, according to his advisors, claiming that he is going to launch a new social media platform within the next 3-ish months. We can wait for more updates on that. I'll be keeping you all updated as we go forward. So we'll see. All right, folks, that said, I mentioned before, Crossroads is totally demonetized by YouTube. Luckily, we have a few sponsors, though, and tonight's sponsor is American Hartford Gold. With all the turbulence with the economy, the stock market, and with the risk of inflation, you can consider investing in an asset that is often stable and that has been on the incline, that is gold and silver, especially as we move into these new digital currencies that we're going to talk about in just a minute. American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. They can have your gold and silver delivered right to your doorstep or into your IRA. To learn more, please check out the link in the comments below, where American Hartford Gold is providing a free 25-page information guide. Again, folks, even if you're not looking to invest in gold or silver, you just want information on it, check out that information guide they're giving us. Now, if you call them now, you can get up to $1,500 of free silver in all qualifying first orders. The phone number for that is 877-260-2764. You can also text Joshua to 65532. And folks, on that note, I want to go into a bit of what's happening with these new digital currencies. First, I want to talk about the cartel and what's happening on the U.S.-Mexico border right now. And then we'll go into a few questions after that. And again, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. Now, let's first talk about what's happening with the U.S.-Mexico border. Some new updates on this. There were cartel members, allegedly, or at the very least coyotes, the human traffickers, who were threatening senators at the border. American senators were being threatened by these individuals. And Epoch Times here reports. It says apparent Mexican drug cartel members threatened Republican senators from across the Rio Grande in Texas when they visited the border as Border Patrol officials grapple with the surge in illegal immigrants and human smuggling, according to one of the senators. And this is according to Senator Steve Daines, Republican. He told this to Breitbart News. He said, quote, "We went right there at midnight on Friday to the Rio Grande River, and we were taunted by Mexican cartel members." He continued, quote, "They didn't know it was Republican senators who were staying there, literally on the water's edge in the brush. But they knew it was probably Border Patrol. They could hear the English voices." Now, a Border Patrol agent who could translate Spanish to English told the senators that the cartel members made, quote, vile and, quote, threatening statements to them. And he said, quote, "Our Border Patrol guys were saying that they were telling us to stick certain," and related to anatomy and other things. "Let me just say that it was absolutely vile and it was horrible and you can't stop us," and so forth. They had these great big flashlights that shot back at us, he said. "This is what's at stake. It's lawlessness. They don't care." Now, in normal situations, having cartel members threaten American senators, American politicians at our border while they're trafficking people into the United States would be treated as a national security issue. Threats from foreign, right? Threats to American politicians, threats to American leaders while they're committing crimes at America's border. Normally, this would be pretty serious. We're under the Biden administration where basically they put into place essentially open borders. They're not calling it this. it's essentially open borders, right? They have catch and release policies. They're not even testing a lot of people for the virus. The ones they are testing, they're saying 10 to 50% have it. The people who are being taken in, they're letting many of them go, a large number of them go without actually putting them in the system to be have court dates and so on to show up. Individuals are coming with children. They're using the children for human trafficking, because when you get a group of people together and you have a child with them, right? You have a child with them, they're considered a family, quote unquote. And they're not testing them. They're not ensuring these people are actually their parents, not actually their family members, something Trump started doing when they were doing DNA testing swabs. The Biden administration has ended this practice because what they found previously was that many of these people are not, in fact, their family members. The kids are literally being trafficked by human traffickers at the US-Mexico border. Individuals coming into the United States illegally are literally using children, trafficked children, as free tickets into this country. And it's something concerning. You're dealing with people who don't find a moral issue with using children trafficked for their own personal gain. I find that very concerning. And in addition to this, people who have no problem threatening American politicians. Remember, folks, the January 6th narrative, the one about the Capitol siege, is based on the idea of senators feeling that they were threatened, Congress members feeling like they were threatened. Here you have senators being threatened by people committing crimes at our border. Will something be done about this? Will they be treated as domestic terrorists? Will this be treated as a terror issue? Will this be treated as, for example, a siege on America? Probably not. Probably none of the above. But we can see what happens. I'll be following this as it develops. Another big issue we're going to have going forward is, of course, the crisis of the school systems in America. We have, who knows how many, because they're not really properly counting them. Tens of thousands, to be fair, right? Tens of thousands on a low level of minors brought into this country, if they're actually put into the school system, which they're required to be, if they're not trafficked, sex trafficked, and so on, which would be concerning. But is one of the big cases, one of the big issues you do have with children not in the system here, being brought here. Many of those kids are going to need extra classes, English as second language classes, extra classes to help them catch up with their grades. Which means huge increases in the finances needed for the school system, and very likely even more schools to handle all the new kids. Now, we'll have to see where this goes. What you're going to see is also a big weight on the social security system, also a big weight on the healthcare system. States, sanctuary states like New York, for example, and New York City, other places, they give as well free healthcare to a lot of these folks. And so just wait, you're going to see a lot of new weight, put on the social security systems and the tax systems. Yeah, a lot going on, folks. All right. Now, that said, I want to talk about this new digital currency, but first off, let's go into a few questions. So, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them now. And I've been talking about this for a while. The Chinese Communist Party is manufacturing the system, right? This new system for countries to bounce back from the virus economically. One of the main ways they're doing it is a digital currency that they can manage and control. Every purchase is controlled by the CCP, and money is worth whatever the government says it's worth in this case. In addition to that, they're going to be using a state capitalist system where the government seizes the means of production, socialism, in other words, where the government partially owns every business. These are the two models being pushed inside China. These are the two models under the China model narrative being pushed outside of China. And now we see that the US may adopt the first one. I'll be going into this in just a minute, but let's go over some questions first. This is from the one and only Pinky Pinky, and good seeing you here. He said, did you see the video of Mike Lindell saying Trump will be back in office in August? What is your opinion? I did see that. Actually, I believe he was speaking in an interview. Was it on War Room Pandemic, I believe it was, with Steve Bannon? Mike Lindell, of course, the MyPillow.com guy, right, the pillow guy. Mike Lindell's been pushing hard against the election, fraud issues. He's still filing. Well, I don't know if he's doing lawsuits, but he's making documentaries. He's working on some new ones, getting together research, and he's claiming that based on the research he's bringing, he believes that Trump will be back in office in August. Now, will that happen? We'll have to see. You do, and now, I bet there were rumors about what happened with Mike Lindell after the election. You might remember he showed up at Trump's office when Trump was still president, still in office, I should say. And he had a stack of papers under his arm. A photojournalist took a picture of these papers, enlarged it, and part of it said, calling in, for example, the national security and bringing in martial law, essentially. Now, I had spoke with Mike Lindell over the phone, and he clarified this. He said it was a document someone handed to him. Long story short, won't get into it. Mike Lindell has been one of the biggest proponents of election integrity after everything that happened in the 2020 elections. And Mike Lindell's been doing documentaries, interviewing folks, getting together research, putting millions of dollars into this research, paying for people to conduct it, and getting it together and trying to push back against what was done in 2020. Now, you do have a lot of states making their own pushbacks against what happened, including in Georgia and including in Arizona most specifically, where there are investigations currently underway into possible wrongdoing in the elections. The biggest one is going to be in Arizona, specifically Maricopa County. And if they conduct full audits, which they're currently working on doing, then yes, there is a chance that they could overturn the elections. This is totally possible. Now, whether that will happen, because this wouldn't just be a state issue, right? This wouldn't just be a state issue. It would have to go through the Supreme Court, and it would mean the Supreme Court would actually have to do something about it. And so, we'll see what happens with that, because the Supreme Court has thrown out the Trump lawsuits, the Trump team lawsuits, the Lynn Wood lawsuits, the Sidney Powell lawsuits, without giving any reason as to why they did it. And even though they were scheduled to hear these lawsuits, they would not hear them. Now, we'll have to see whether the Supreme Court will act if significant evidence is brought to them by states. If states conduct their own investigations and bring hard evidence from those investigations and overturn their own local elections because of that, we're going to be seeing issues I think this country's, as far as I know, has never faced in history. And if that does happen, then it is possible. It's possible. It's a long shot, but it's possible. It's not even a long shot. It's possible. We'll have to see. It's unknown territory, untreaded territory. Mike Lindell does have grounds for saying it. I wouldn't say it's not absolute, of course. There are investigations which back his claims. We'll have to see what comes out from those, and there's a lot of evidence out there, so we'll see. Next question is from Robin M. He said, "Hello from Texas, Joshua." Hey. He said, "Do you think they will ever finish the wall? Did you hear Biden say there won't be a GOP by 2024? Any thoughts?" Well, in terms of the wall, I think that's what they're trying to do right now. They're definitely trying to stop the building of the wall, even though they have to pay for the machinery and such that's there to finish it. Even though they keep paying for it, they're not having them build it. There is currently a Government Accountability Office investigation, the GAO, investigation being done into Biden's halt of the building of the wall. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out from that. But it does not seem the Biden administration is interested in finishing building it. And ironically, while the Biden administration put a freeze on the building of the wall, while they've given all these incentives for people to immigrate here illegally, while they're working on all these things, Biden has put Kamala Harris, the vice president, in charge of this issue. She's come out and said they're not going to be looking at actually stopping the flow. She said they're going to be looking at fixing the root issue. Just my own personal analysis, I would assume the root issue she's going to find is going to be, what do you think? Probably income inequality around the world and globalism. And I'd put my money on that. And she's probably going to say there's inequality and they're seeking equal opportunity here in the United States, ironically, because they want equal outcome regardless of opportunity. And very likely they're going to look at, fixing issues in these communities or whatever. It's probably going to turn into a race issue and a welfare redistribution issue, I would imagine. basically the Biden administration is not looking to actually stopping the flow of people into this country. In other words, they're looking at, the issues at the root of it, and you can expect income inequality, quote unquote, to be the issue they come up with. I would assume, based on everything we've been seeing so far from this administration. Now, in terms of 2024, Biden saying there won't be a GOP by 2024, that's probably, if they get their agenda, if nothing stops them from doing what they're doing, that may be the case. They're pushing H.R. 1, this bill to basically establish through the federal level every change they made to the election system locally in 2020 that was deemed controversial. They're going to make it so the federal government mandates those changes for states. And if states don't push back against that, that is going to become the law of the land. They're looking to overturn some different seats, including in the House. The Biden administration is looking to change election laws probably before 2022, when Trump's going to be trying to overturn, through getting behind different political campaigns, going to be trying to overturn the House and the Senate back to the Republicans. There's going to be a big battle over that, we can expect. If H.R. 1 passes and states don't push back against it, we can expect them to have in place all the same election changes that were done in 2020, and that's it. We'll have to see. At the same time, remember why the Obama administration started doing this whole open border policy, and why they talked about, for example, giving citizenship to illegal aliens. That was because a couple things. The Obama advisors at that time had seen something, which is that they get, I think it's about 80% votes from the Hispanic community for Democrats, meaning that if they were to give citizenship to 11 million people, and they put these people in, say, key swing state districts when they resettle them, quote unquote, these people are very likely going to vote for Democrat. And if they put these people into key areas, give them citizenship, right to vote, or they make, for example, changes to laws that don't look at citizenship, that allow these people to vote without punishment, or other things like this, then yes, if they get 11 million new votes, probably not every one of them is going to vote, or up to 33 million, some people have put it at. Yeah, game over. That was what the Obama administration advisors were talking about, and that was the main finding they had before they started pushing this whole open borders agenda. Before they started talking about giving voting rights to illegal aliens and so on. And remember as well, right? The Democrats, the Democratic Party used to be the party for, against these types of things. And ironically, the unions used to be the ones really against illegal immigration. Now they're for it. Why is that, right? It's mainly because you've had a lot of subversion from these different open borders organizations and from these groups tied to these socialist front groups. Actually, great articles on this. You can look at the writings from Trevor Loudon, Loudon. He's written for Epoch Times about this. Really great reporting, talking about how this whole thing started. Now, let's see here. This is from Viv B. He said, who is in charge of border situation? Kamala has no visits there on her schedule, even though Biden put her in charge. I think they're talking about it, but yeah, they actually haven't moved on anything from what I've seen. And Biden said that, maybe he'll go to the border. We'll have to see what happens with it. Trump is actually talking about going to the border now, so we'll have to see. Again, this is pure speculation, pure analysis. I really think that there's some new statements from Kamala Harris talking about how she's going to deal with this issue. She's saying she's going to look at the root issue, the root cause of the border crisis, which I would assume, per just my analysis, I assume it's going to look at the reason people have for coming here in the first place. What's the reason they have for coming here? They want to make more money. How would the Democrats frame a person wanting to make more money? Income inequality, right? I guarantee you, my analysis, right? I really think that the narrative that could come out from this is that income inequality is the root issue of them, wanting to immigrate here illegally. And so we need to fix the issue of income inequality. And how are they going to do that? Well, in the United States is going to be one issue. Maybe they're going to say we're going to do it in the US and become a model, a beacon for the world to follow, fixing this income inequality. Maybe that'll be it. Or maybe they're going to do more outreach for these countries. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll have to see. Let's see here, and that's just my analysis. Again, take it for what it's worth. This is from Amanda Casser. He said, Josh, what's up with the vaccine passports? So there's been news talking about the Biden administration possibly getting behind vaccine passports. It's possible. It is possible. Now, to be clear on this, what Biden's talking about doing is not, he's actually saying he's not going to make it a mandate through the government. And so what he's doing instead, which is really ironic, and I'll explain why in a minute, is he's working with big business, big corporations, and he's getting the businesses to enforce these vaccine passports. Now, what do you call it when government, in this case, even socialist government, we could say, but what do you call it when government partners up with the corporate system to institute totalitarian policies? This is literal fascism. And these are the folks calling you fascists, right? This is literal fascism. The marriage, the merging of the corporate system with the big government system, that is literal fascism. And so, yes, they're working on what are, by definition, fascist policies around vaccine passports. And yes, you're going to have big businesses, big corporations enforcing these vaccine passports, where they can deny you services unless you have your vaccine passport. Now, other countries already have this in place. Israel, for example, already has it. And the companies that are pushing for this, right, it's a business now. The companies that are pushing for this, who've created the technology for this, they've been sending information packets to different politicians in the United States, all around the country. And aside from the federal level passport, vaccine passport system they're doing, they're going to be doing on the local level as well. And so we'll have to see. New York City, for example, has already put this in place to an extent, where you have to have your vaccine passport or a negative COVID test if you want to, for example, access different things like shows or, hockey games or whatever. They're already doing it. And so we'll have to see where that goes. If it's not an official government policy and instead it is a corporate policy partnered with big government, ironically, then, if you don't use big business products, maybe it won't be affected, but we'll have to see what this actually entails because, frankly, folks, we're living under pretty big monopolies right now. And really, if they want to not deny you services, you can be cut off from quite a bit. One of the big concerns with the digital currency, which I'll be explaining in just a minute. First, one more question. This is from Pango474. He said, Josh, I can appreciate that voter integrity is being addressed, but why is no one addressing the absence of law enforcement? DOJ and FBI are doing nothing about anything. This is true. And really, we saw the same thing under the Trump administration, where it did not seem to be the case that they were working for Trump. Remember how many heads of the FBI had to step down because of various scandals, right? James Comey, others. How many heads of the DOJ ended up stepping down or being purged by Trump because they weren't, listening to orders? If you go back a bit further, you talk about the seventh floor group, the deep state, quote unquote, right? The seventh floor group, the bureaucrats in charge of these organizations, they tend to be pretty woke, and they tend to be kind of the permanent bureaucracy that determines what gets prosecuted and what doesn't. There are a lot of things that get prosecuted that are oftentimes only prosecuted because maybe there's some personal interest behind the scenes, while other people get a free pass, right? There's no equal representation under the law like there's supposed to be in the American system. You do have inequality, ironically, when it comes to the way that laws are enforced. And so, yes, this is an issue, and yes, from the federal level, this is a huge issue. If you get into that seventh floor group, right, that they call the deep state, different names for them. I've heard names, for example, like the Mandarins. I've heard people call them black dragons, bow ties. They have all kinds of nicknames. Different black dragons, by the way. Black dragons is also one of the 5 dragon families in China, but it's another issue for another day. And real quick, a few of you are asking about the book list. Yes, I need to get on that. I'm working on this communism series first, but I want to make a video for that as well. So stay tuned. I haven't forgot about it, but it's just taking a little bit. All right, let's see here. So first, I'm going to go over this new digital currency issue because it's what I've been warning about. It's what I've been telling everybody to watch out for. It's what I've been saying is going to happen because the CCP is pushing for this. And this is one of the two main things to watch for. The other one being this new merging of the government systems with the corporate systems. We're already seeing a little bit in the US. But this state capitalist monopoly, as Lenin would call it, aka socialism, is being pushed under that narrative, state capitalism. And one of the two facets of this, right? One of the two facets of this is this digital currency. Epoch Times here reporting. Let's go into it. And by the way, tonight's tea of choice is Charleston Plantation tea, which I got when I was in Charleston just recently. It's quite good, actually. It's like a nice black tea. I'm really enjoying it. All right, so this is from Epoch Times reporting. It says GOP lawmaker urges architects of digital dollar to consider risks to civil liberties. And it says here, as central banks, including the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve, but is able to print our money, long story behind that, are looking into implementing their own digital currencies. Real quick, those of you who don't know, the money we have in America is not actually from the government. The money we have in America is from the Federal Reserve. And if you look on your bank notes, right, it's a Federal Reserve bank note. You have bank notes, right? The Federal Reserve is neither federal nor a reserve. It's technically a private business with some government overlap. They're able to control inflation. They're able to bail out banks. They're able to print their own money. And by printing money, every time they print money, inflation goes up, meaning the money you have in the bank, the actual value of it, tangible value, goes down. Because that's how inflation works. Unless you're invested in a hard asset like gold or silver or something else like that. Hint, hint, right? But let's go into it, right? Now, the Federal Reserve is looking at something new, as are many other central banks. And we'll talk about this. It says here they're looking into implementing their own digital currencies. A Republican lawmaker warned of a key risk associated with their adoption, namely whether they could be exploited to curb civil liberties, something I've been warning about. It says here nations across the world are mulling developing central bank digital currencies. They're using as the acronym CBDCs. And they're claiming it's to modernize their financial systems, ward off the threat from cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and speed up domestic and international payments, with China one of the most advanced in its effort. And folks, let's go over one more piece of this because it's very important to understand what's happening right now. This is Voice of America reporting another article. It says China and SWIFT partner to take digital currency global. It says China's central bank has partnered with SWIFT, the European-based global system for financial messaging and cross-border payments, to set up a joint venture. A move that observers say shows China's ambition to take the digital version of its currency, the yuan, global. Now, what does this mean, folks? It means they're going to have a new digital currency. In other words, it is not something you can tangibly hold in your hands. This is not something you can carry in your pocket. It is something that is digital. What does that mean? Now, a lot of people, when they think digital currency, they think Bitcoin, other digital cryptocurrencies like that. These are not cryptocurrencies. These are not anonymous systems. These are systems tied to you, tied to your social security number, tied to your identity. Mikado 1, you said creature from Jekyll Island. Yes, so the Federal Reserve was created at Jekyll Island through a very long series of very controversial issues. And if none of you have read The Creature from Jekyll Island, I do recommend it, about the history of this. But let's go into this a bit more. Now, this is the Chinese Communist Party partnering with the SWIFT payment system to bring this currency global. What does this mean? It means the Chinese Communist Party, under this new currency, will be able to control every single payment that is made. Every single payment can be approved or denied by the Chinese Communist Party. And this is the same system that has a social credit system. This is the same government that has databases on every single Chinese citizen, a database which they've expanded to many people outside of China as well. I reported on it, exclusive story going back several years ago, which is why they're stealing, for example, security clearances, banking data, and so on from American citizens. And they've been putting this together, and what do? They can look at your internet history. They can look at your Twitter activity. They can look at your social media activity. They can look at every purchase you make. They can look at your friends, your relationships, your connections. They can look at their ideologies, their political positioning, and they can give you a citizen score based on that. Now, that system, the social credit system, is being implemented already by the Chinese Communist Party and exported by the Chinese Communist Party. And if you have the CCP able to control purchases using this system, now what happens, folks, if you go, let's say 10 years from now, and you can only use digital currency, Federal Reserve, let's imagine Federal Reserve here, which prints our money as we speak. If the Federal Reserve adopts a digital currency and they make that the sole form of currency, what does that mean? The CCP is currently doing that, right? They're making it in areas that they've already launched this the sole currency. You cannot buy a house. You cannot do anything unless you use this digital currency. What does that mean? It means if you're an enemy of the state, if you are deemed someone of, say, unethical values by the state, if you have religious views that go outside what is approved by the state, which in China is pretty much any religion not controlled by the CCP, literally. If you make purchases that go against the interests of the state, if you're friends or family members with someone deemed a state enemy, they can give you a negative citizen score, and they can then restrict you in terms of what you can or can't purchase. Now, imagine what happens if all currencies are digital, right? What happens if you go to the local supermarket and you swipe your Federal Reserve card or your Bank of China card, and they deem that you're, just speculating 10 years from now, they deem that you've, 10 years ago wrote some negative comments on Facebook that go against the allowed political ideology. And they say, sorry, sir, you've been rejected. You can't buy anything. No, where are you going to buy food? Where are you going to buy a car? Where are you going to buy a house? This is, as James Woolley notes, absolute control. This is them having absolute control over purchases, absolute control over what you can or cannot buy. And the CCP is framing this as a way, in its implementation in China, they're framing this as a way to stop money from leaving China. They're saying it's to stop money laundering, meaning, and that's concerning. That means that even criminals can't move money without going through the system. And so the CCP can monitor all the payments. Now, what does this mean in the US? As we've seen articles, for example, of loyalty pledges being required, allegedly, according to some claims, being required for the US military right now, as there are ideological purges being done within the government, as people, based on tweets they made 5 or 10 years ago or whatever, are getting fired from their jobs. What happens when you have a private business? Because keep in mind, folks, the money in this country is not technically federal. It's Federal Reserve. It's not technically federal. It is a private business. What happens if a private business decides that you just shouldn't be able to do this, that you're canceled? As we already see, for example, American Express and other credit card companies already canceling people's ability to make purchases. They're already doing this with some credit card companies. If you've said things that are deemed, not right by the woke mobs, right? Sorry, folks, can no longer take your credit cards. You're demonetized. You have PayPal. You're kicked off. All these things, they're already doing it. What happens if there is a digital currency tied to your identity as well? See, they can't right now. If you use banks, if you go through the banking system, technically they can cancel you. We've seen, for example, websites that are deemed, enemies of the woke mob. We've seen them, for example, already kicking people off, already restricting payments, already saying that people can't use their services. These people can still go and get hard assets, cash and still make purchases with cash. What happens when that right is also taken away, right? What happens when that ability to have cash in your pocket is taken away? This is what the digital currency will do. Now, in addition to this, the CCP partnering with SWIFT right now to roll out this digital currency globally. Do you know what that'll mean? It'll mean that the US sanctions on China mean nothing because the Chinese Communist Party can just go around them. And this means as well that if the Biden administration doesn't act against SWIFT payment systems immediately, the CCP is going to have pretty much immunity when it comes to sanctions, meaning the Chinese Communist Party can do whatever it wants without facing sanctions. The Chinese Communist Party can create a dueling world order, right? They already have it kind of to an extent. Any country that gets sanctioned by the United Nations, sanctioned by the United States, sanctioned by Europe, unable to make payments using the dollar, right? Which is pretty much the basis of international purchases. It means that they have to participate in the alternate economy, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, these countries. And there's an entire separate order of things being done to these countries. If the US allows SWIFT and the Chinese Communist Party to partner up on this new digital currency and bring it global, that's the end of U.S. sanctions. The Pax Americana, the peace under America, will come to an end with that. This will be the end of the American-led system of peace, right? The system of peace that America has established, where criticize it as you would like. Under this Pax Americana, if a country commits genocide, they can face sanctions by the United States. If a country violates the yes, woke policies of the West, but sometimes it has good sides of it as well, which is standing up for human rights around the world. If countries violate what is deemed immoral by this global system, they can be denied access to the international finance system, meaning that they get sanctioned, meaning that they have incentive to not abuse their citizens. The China model, the one the CCP is pushing, basically says this: you can do whatever you want and we will not meddle in your affairs, right? That's the keyword they use, meddle in your affairs. We will not meddle in your affairs. You can do what you want to your citizens. And this means that, well, who's to say that genocide is going to be stopped? Who is to say the CCP can't continue using slave labor, which they're already doing? Who is to say that they can't, for example, massacre their citizens, which they're already doing for the illegal organ trade? And who's to say that other countries can't do this as well? And what is the U.S. going to do about it? What is the U.S. going to do about it? What is Europe going to do about it? What will the world do about it when you have a separate international order protected by the Chinese Communist Party and their system pushing for military goals while the American military is focused on, gender equality or trans rights or whatever they're working on? This is the way things are heading, right? This is the way things are heading unless it is stopped. And we see now not just China doing it, not just them partnering up with SWIFT. We see the Federal Reserve doing it, and we see other systems in the world doing it, other banking systems in the world doing it. And this means, again, that the China model, as I've been warning over and over and over again, is going global. And I mentioned before, folks, the CCP, as it allowed the virus to spread globally, as it restricted travel within China from Wuhan after the virus broke out, after it assessed by its own analysis that the problem in Wuhan was so serious that people from Wuhan should not be able to travel throughout China, and they shut down travel, they allowed international travel. And while they allowed international travel, they cornered the PPE market, the personal protective equipment market, meaning that they used mask diplomacy and other systems to incentivize people to partner with the CCP to get PPE, personal protective equipment. As they were doing this, they started working on architecting, creating this new system to bounce back from the virus. And that is, again, twofold: the digital currency, and the second part, which watch out for, because I've been telling you this first one's coming. Second one they're going to be doing, CCPR is already rolling it out, is what they call public-private partnerships, meaning that the government will take over part of every private business. The government will be a co-owner of every single business. And what is that? They're calling it state capitalism. If we go back to 1917, shortly after the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin talked about, right, how can we advance to communism if we fear the state of socialism? And he described the first state of socialism to be the state capitalist monopoly. And what they're pushing for is state capitalism, ironically, technically fascism, right? The marrying of the corporate system with the government system, technically fascism. The CCP is rolling that out, and they are promoting that as the model to bounce back. So, folks, watch out as they talk about build back better and all these things. Watch out for public-private partnerships where the government, for example, invests in. I would assume maybe they'll do something like this. The government could invest in companies, but maintain partial ownership of them, or maintain some kind of ongoing tax burden, quote unquote, that, or maybe they're allowed to do it if they sign a contract where they have to support, for example, the political agendas of the government, right? There might be different agreements with it. Watch out for this, because this is what the CCP is doing. Yes, this is technically by the book fascism, and it's what they're promoting globally. And you can already see a lot of mainstream media talking about this in a positive light. I saw New York Times, for example, talking about the glories of state capitalism. They're already promoting this. They're already promoting this. And that's what's next. First step, they're rolling out. Next step, watch out for. All right, let's go some more stories. Now, a few of you were talking about this vaccine passport. Florida's putting its foot down, saying not here. Epoch Times reports this: Governor DeSantis to take executive emergency action against vaccine passports. It says here, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said in a press conference on March 29th that he will take emergency executive action shortly against the concept of Americans needing a vaccine passport to be able to travel domestically and internationally. And he said this: we are not supportive of that. I think it's something that people have certain freedoms and individual liberties to make decisions for themselves, the governor said. Now, shortly, it says here, he's going to take this executive action. He's saying that he's going to do it. And so this does show to some extent, again, another example of this, local states saying that not on my watch when it comes to these policies, and refusing to implement the policies the federal government is putting through, the issues the federal government is pushing for. This is one of the interesting parts of the way the American system was established by the founding fathers, right? That states actually do have a lot of rights. States actually have the ability to push back against federal overreach. And Florida now, regardless of what the Biden administration does, is saying, not on our watch. We're not going to do it here. In addition to that, folks, another Epoch Times story says million maskless march and mask burning events are being planned in Florida. It says here, Florida residents who oppose mask mandates due to the COVID-19 pandemic are trying to organize a large protest and mask burning event next month. Now, these mask burning events have happened elsewhere. Idaho, for example, people went in front of the local government buildings there and burned their masks in large bins. You have these protests taking place. Now, this is according to this group in Florida. They said, quote, "You are invited to the Million Maskless March and Mask Burning, Saturday, April 10th, 2021 at 3 p.m. at the corner of A1A and Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale," said Chris Nelson, the organizer of the protests, in a post online. Nelson added that April 10th marks the 1 year of mask tyranny in Broward County, and we will mark the date with a celebration of freedom. And the event, dubbed the Million Maskless March and Mask Burning, will be held on that date in Fort Lauderdale, he said. Now, as these protests continue, expect them to spread to other states as well. Again, we already saw this in Idaho, see this in Florida, see it in other places. Actually, there's been a lot of action in Europe that hardly gets any coverage. I oftentimes mean to cover it on this show. Sometimes I have it further down the list. I just don't get to them. But across a lot of parts of Europe, you have similar protests taking place. Across the United States, you have these. There's a lot of movement with this. And you're going to see a lot more of this, I can almost guarantee. Maybe not the mask angle, but with Trump pushing again for launching his 45office.com, pushing for local activism. Get ready, folks, for the rise of a new grassroots. Get ready as all this stuff happens, all this stuff we're talking about, all this risk of tyranny, a new grassroots emerging, one of which had at least 74 million votes in this country, possibly a lot more. And a lot of the people who voted for Trump, supported Trump, I guarantee you, are going to be part of this new movement as he moves forward. And again, as soon as he launches his new social media, you can expect to watch Facebook, Twitter, Google, maybe even their shares take a huge drop, depending on the services Trump implements on that thing. Because you're going to see a lot of users drop their other social media accounts and migrate over. You're going to watch a lot of businesses drop their accounts on these sites, stop investing in ads on these platforms because they can get canceled at any moment, and put their money and assets into something that will not ban them for having an opinion that is not approved by the state. Get ready for the grassroots in America to take off, and already you see the brewing signs of it. Get ready, folks. I've been saying, give it, I think, 2-3-ish months before you start seeing movement on it, but it's already starting. Another story here, some concerning news in New York. Let's go into it. And remember how the narrative for a long time was defund the police? Well, they tried that in Minneapolis. They tried it in Minneapolis and it failed miserably, to the point where people are asking to bring the police back because crime and murders are skyrocketing. Same thing in Los Angeles, right? Different places where they put these in place. Crime is through the roof. They can't control it. And they're rolling back the defund the police movement. But the new thing they're pushing for is removing legal protections for police, qualified immunity. Let's explain this. Yeah. All right. So Epoch Times reports this. It says the New York City Council has passed a series of measures that affects police operations, including a hotly debated measure that makes it easier to sue officers for misconduct. The council voted last week to adopt 5 bills and 3 resolutions that stated are, quote, designed to increase police accountability and reimagine public safety in our city. One of the most significant of the measures adopted by the council was to eliminate qualified immunity, a doctrine that insulates government officials from civil liability for their conduct. Now, personally, folks, I'm all for removing qualified immunity for government officials. I think it'd be fantastic if we could sue our government officials. I think, for example, suing the officer who shot Ashley Babbitt in Washington at the Capitol building on January 6th, be great if the family could sue him. It'd be great if government officials violate the Constitution and can be sued by their constituents. I think it'd be fantastic. But at the same time, what that means, why it's in place, is that if you can sue them for anything you dislike, now normally you can sue them. For example, remember the news came out in the Trump administration where this was ended, but there was a slush fund for like sexual misconduct allegations for government officials in Congress. There was literally a taxpayer-funded slush fund to pay off people if they had issues of this. You can technically sue them right now, but the money typically goes through taxpayer money that doesn't actually affect them. There's some loopholes in it, right? There's some issues with it, but for the most part, you can't really do much. What this means for police officers, though, is something pretty serious. It means that if a police officer arrests someone today, tomorrow, the next day, it means the people they arrest or the family members of these people today, tomorrow, and the next day can sue that police officer for any reason they see fit. If they feel the officer put the handcuffs on too tight, or they feel the officer was racist, or they feel the officer didn't respect their feelings or didn't call them by the right gender pronoun or whatever the issue may be, they can sue them. And whether or not the officer is found to be guilty or not guilty, in some places where they've already put this through, the officer has to pay for the court fees out of their own pockets. And what does this mean? It means in places where they've already done this, officers are doing one of two things. They're either quitting because they don't want to put themselves or their families at constant risk of litigation that they cannot afford, or they are saying, I'm just not going to do anything. Unless someone murders someone and I have no possible risk of getting sued, I ain't doing nothing. I'm going to sit in my police car and sign parking tickets, and that's it. Right? They're not going to get involved in any issue whatsoever that could get them in trouble. They're not going to put their lives at risk. They're not going to put their necks out. They're not going to take risks. They're not going to do anything that would put them at personal risk of liability. Already, you see this happening in some regards because they don't want to get charged like the officers with the George Floyd case are getting charged. They don't want to be put in that situation. This takes it a step further. Now, the irony of this, which doesn't make a lot of sense, is that as they're defunding the police, as they're getting rid of this stuff, as they're really just dismantling the police systems and law enforcement systems in this country, they're also putting forth socialist policies like the gun grab policies they're trying to make, like, for example, universal background checks for buying guns, which they're pushing through currently, like other things like this, which you need an enforcement mechanism for. It's one of the things I've mentioned to friends I have who are socialist. And yeah, I do have socialist friends that they claim to dislike the police. But look, Frederick Bastiat, The Law, right? Frederick Bastiat, The Law, highly recommended reading. It's very thin. He has Frederick Bastiat has a whole collected works as well. They're fantastic. In fact, right here. Frederick Bastiat was fantastic. He notes the difference between pillaging, right, tyranny, and normal systems of law. That any kind of socialist system, no matter how you implement it, no matter how you implement it, needs an enforcement mechanism. Socialism without an enforcement mechanism is just, philanthropy. It's just donations. Without an enforcement mechanism, without boots on the ground and guns in hands of the officials in charge, they don't have a way of enforcing it. It's just donations in that case. How are they going to enforce these systems if they take apart the police? Now, that's a big question to ask them. One possible answer to this is that, well, they just don't know what they're doing. They're dismantling they're dismantling these systems of enforcement while simultaneously trying to implement totalitarian policies, essentially, without a way of enforcing them, which means it's not going to work. The other possibility is they want to get rid of the police or normal forms of policing. My big concern. In other words, one issue that the government faces in this country, if they want to implement really totalitarian policies, is that the police and the sheriffs in particular are sworn to protect the Constitution. They're not sworn to, uphold the law of the officials in charge. They're sworn to uphold the Constitution, meaning that, like, for example, with sheriffs, for example, you've had a lot of sheriffs across the United States saying that if there's a gun grab policy, that they will not enforce it. Meaning that already, if the government wants to act in tyranny in the United States, sheriffs will not enforce some of these policies if they think that they violate the Constitution. Meaning already, government totalitarianism is not really possible in this country because the police system is set up in such a way, thanks to our founding fathers, that they cannot do it. If the officials, sheriffs in particular, believe that these things violate the Constitution and they just say, no, I ain't going to enforce it. I don't care what the government says. Now, what happens if the government creates laws that incentivize these sheriffs or regular police to quit? And if they quit in such large numbers that we're left with a vacuum, what happens? You are never left with an eternal vacuum. Always something will fill that vacuum. What will the solution be of these government officials who dismantle the policing systems? Probably some big police reform policy, which may look for ideological alignment, which may look to groups like Interpol, International Police, or others to fill that void. They're very likely not going to let things fall into total anarchy. And that would essentially be the only way they could enforce things like gun grabs or something like that, because sheriffs in a lot of states will not enforce it. My big concern is that this is what the real agenda is. Whether that's the case or not, we'll have to see. It could just be that they don't think things through very well, and they don't put two and two together that, I can create totalitarian policy A and then dismantle the enforcement system, B, and somehow that's going to work, which it's no way it's going to work, right? We'll have to see. Yeah, Ryan Cronin mentioned military. That's a possibility as well. They can call in the National Guard, and already they're doing these loyalty pledges and this ideological purge within the military. Currently underway. They're doing these new, rooting out white nationalism and looking at people's ideologies as a way to clean out, quote unquote, the military. Something concerning, because these people already would have different types of background checks and so on for their positions. Meaning already that they're held to certain standards. What you're seeing right now is it's very similar to what the CCP does. What's happening in America with this military ideological allegiance type purge is very similar to what the CCP does, where the Communist Party of China demands party loyalty by people who serve. In China, the military is a party military, not something sworn to protect the Constitution like it is in the United States. So, folks, that's the current state of things. Now, as always, there's a lot of stuff I want to get to, but just don't have time. And so, again, folks, I'll be doing these live Q&As every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Before we close it up for tonight, though, we have a interesting feature you'll be interested in. Now, NTD, the sister media of Epoch Times, which Crossroads also broadcasts on, is hosting an international figure painting competition. I want to end it with this tonight because I think you'll all like it. Now, we like to present a very rare and precious collection of award-winning artworks from the NTD International Figure Painting Competition. The competition's mission, pure truth, kindness, and beauty, has inspired many artists in creating art that is both profound in content as well as perfect in technique. Original artworks, canvas wraps, and prints are now available for purchase through the Inspired Arts store. And please support the artists and competition's mission by bringing the art home. Great art if you're looking for some nice stuff for your house, folks. You can visit the website for the full collection at www.inspiredoriginal.org/oil-painting. And here's a short video describing one of these works. In just a sec.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her, all sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, if you're looking for some good art for your home, check that out. It also helps support NTD and their whole mission there. And again, NTD is a sister media of Epoch Times, and Crossroads broadcasts on NTD as well. Now, folks, that said, always love doing these. In the meantime, again, I'm doing these videos, live Q&As Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So be sure to tune in again this coming Thursday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, please check out the interviews we've been publishing. In the meantime, I think you'll really like them. Trying to get some really good folks for you all. Now, as always, that said, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.